The sound of thousands of happy feet fills the night air as these penguins march to shore, heading back home to their burrows for the night. Onlookers from around the world flock to see the fairy penguins on Phillip Island all year round, and spectators last week were delighted when they got to experience the largest gathering of penguins to date. But this hasn't always been the case. These penguins have always called this island home, but with the introduction of humans and invasive species, the ecological balance has been severely disrupted. Conservation efforts on Phillip Island have been a long crusade to save this once embattled colony.
There was the official formation of the Penguin Study Group, which was a volunteer-run group that began in 1968 that really started focusing on penguin research and penguin conservation here on Summerlands Peninsula. And that's kind of where we say research and conservation here on Summerlands at least officially started with an official group looking after the penguins.
In the 1920s, Phillip Island residents began to take tourists by torchlight to see the little penguins' nightly arrivals on the beach on the Summerland Peninsula. At the same time, the Summerland Estate was created, giving rise to nearly 800 housing allotments in the same area as the colony, a move that would prove disastrous for the native wildlife. In 1955, the Department of Fisheries and Wildlife, after recognising the impact the Summerland Estate was having on the little penguins, established a large reserve over the penguin colony. 30 years later, the Penguin Protection Plan was announced to include scientific research, preparation of a management plan, fox control program, and the buyback of the Summerland Peninsula, much to locals' dismay.
In the 1980s, the first researcher here was employed to then investigate whether, yes, we are seeing this decline in numbers. And it was seen that, that there is a decline in the penguin numbers, and probably by the year 2000, we wouldn't have any penguins left on the Summerlands Peninsula unless drastic action happened. And that's when, in the mid-80s, the government brought in this buyback scheme where people on the Summerlands Peninsula were encouraged to sell their houses back to the government. And if they were to sell, it could only be acquired back by the government. And they would then remove those houses, and then that area was then transformed into penguin habitat.
Fast forward to 2010, and the completion of the Summerland Estate buyback was achieved. Final houses and infrastructure were removed, with an ongoing program of revegetation and rehabilitation of the penguin habitat continuing. 2011 was the second year in a row where no penguins were killed by foxes, and by 2017, foxes were eradicated from Phillip Island.
We're up to 40,000 breeding adult penguins here, which is massive. We are the largest, here on Phillip Island, we have the largest little penguin colony in the world.
Last week, the reserve broke records with 5,219 little penguins arriving on the beach in a 50-minute period.
Those numbers have never been seen before in the peak of breeding or any time at all, let alone now when we're not at the peak. So it's highly unusual for a number of reasons. Really good, it's a really good sign. It indicates that obviously we have a lot of penguins and there's food nice and close to the shore, and so these penguins are doing your daily foraging trips and then coming back into the colony, but certainly something that we've never ever seen before. And first there was a bit of disbelief of was something counted wrong? What's going on? And then these big numbers continuing, and then these, over 5,000 birds. We're like, no, this is real. This is actually happening, and it's mind blowing. It makes you feel really good, and it again just confirms that what you're doing is obviously very good.
For these fairy penguins, there's plenty more fish in the sea. Nick Ferguson reporting for News APLENTY.